Hey everybody, welcome back to the Billy Club, our exploration of Marvel's Crimson Crusader and all of his swashbuckling 60s madness as we make our way through his entire history at Marvel. I'm Nico, and you guys can find me at Nico Action, that's NicoAction on Twitter and Instagram.
And I'm Tori Sheehan. You can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and at SM Tori, that's Tori with an I, on Instagram, as well as at the Billy Club Pod on all of your socials.
And we are here to move a story forward a little bit. I have no ill will toward this story or its characters or its creative team, but I do feel like I'm at a place where I don't want to talk about this issue anymore. And it's not a problem, but it's indicative of why 60s books are hard to talk about today a little bit.
Most of my notes are actually conversations about the way that this story, which is guest starring Ka-Zar the Great, apparently,
Apparent.
is indicative of the style of the time, and also kind of indicative of the fact that, like, I don't want to say they didn't know what the fuck they were doing, but I don't think they were considering the best way to go about it.
I agree. And just to talk about it for a moment, we're here to discuss Daredevil, the Man Without Fear, as Here He Comes, number 24. This is by Stan Lee and Gene Colan, with some terrific inks by Frank Giacoia, and it's lettered by none other than S. Rosen, lettering himself and doesn't feel the need to complete his own name. It's brilliant. I think calling this book The Midnight Stalker is weird. I think a lot of stuff about this book is weird. Here's the thing I feel, though. Daredevil 24 really is kind of the last issue in a line of kind of dumb issues that we liked. And it's the last really dumb issue that doesn't feel like it has anything Daredevil about it for a while.
Yes, I definitely agree. This is an issue that made me be like, I'm getting sick and tired of flipping genres and having them try to shove Daredevil into a genre, as opposed to building on Daredevil and letting the genre be part of the driving force of the story.
I really get that. The thing that comes to mind here is that this issue is on the heels of a couple of other, oh, look, the return of that villain. We saw more Gladiator. We saw more Owl. Now we have more Ka-Zar, and, Ka-Zar, however you want to say it, he's never the bad guy. He's not the problem. It's his brother. And this is one of those situations where, like, I love a lot of things about classic campy comics, but, like, if you're telling me there was a guy whose name was Reed Richards and his BFF was a guy named Victor Von Doom, you want me to think that Vic had a chance? It's like there's just some names that kind of damn you a little bit. The name Plunder, not great.
No. And I feel like Captain America really taught us 90s kids that too.
Yeah, for sure. There are some things about this issue that definitely play up tropes of the time. They play into some things that really feel sillier than they feel strong. And I think it starts right away. This 5-page long, sort of boring fight sequence. It's not a particularly spectacular fight sequence for Daredevil. It's not a particularly spectacular fight sequence for these goons. Like, who's out here giving, like, a lackey award? Oh, I won a lackey this year. I was goon number 4 in Daredevil 24's opening sequence. Give me my no prize. Yes. It's not like that.
Yeah, for me, it was very much, this starting fight definitely gave me the feeling of, this is going to be an issue that is both rushed, ridiculous, and not really in the fun way. For me, the fact that they're like, there's guerrilla warfare in this random European country, I was like, it wouldn't be this at the time, and it wouldn't be these kinds of goons. I spent a lot of time thinking that these 5 issues leading to him getting a jet to England, if it was happening today, would have been an entire issue that would have been a lot of Matt Murdock's internal monologue about what he just got out of. What does it mean for him as a superhero, as he's dodging these bad guys, as he's
the hand behind it.
Right, like, yeah, like, it would be both introspective perspective as he's trying to hide. Maybe he would have gotten injured early on. I honestly did expect one of these shots to hit him to make him more vulnerable as he went forward. And the fact that it didn't let me know that this was going to be a zero stakes issue.
It's also so silly that it starts on the heels of last issue, because no, it doesn't.
It sort of does. He escapes from the Coliseum and has to walk home in a place where he doesn't know. So, like, presumably several, I don't know, 100 feet or so after he got out of the Coliseum, he gets ambushed. And it's the silliest ambush. You never feel like there's going to be anything. I held out a small hope that these guys would show up at the end and be like, fuck you, Daredevil. And they don't at all. And so there's nothing to this. It's just Stan and Jean being like, okay, he's in Europe. How are we going to get him out of here? Oh, we want to bring back one more dude who's in England right now. So let's point A to point B as fast as possible with some punchy. Then we get a 2-page flashback. And I understand that, like, people who may have just recently started might not remember an issue from a year ago. But at the same time, like, the flashback is when I was like, oh, this is going to be a lot of fluff this episode, because this plot that they've decided on isn't meaty. But I also think that there was a way to make this plot more meaty that would have given us a better Ka-Zar, a better Matt Daredevil, and a much more interesting look into the issue. This issue very obviously doesn't really sink in until page 16, but the first 15 pages could have very easily have been a detective story. It could have been Daredevil, sure, keep the opening fight, keep the opening sequence to the jet, fine, whatever. If he lands in England by page 8 and he is slipping on his robe, he sees that this looks like this, and I believe that Matt has defended Ka-Zar in court before.
Yeah.
And so it would have been very easy to turn this into Daredevil being like, that's weird. Let me figure out what's going on. And then, like, superhero detective work, him and Ka-Zar staring at footprints, figuring out what the problem is. And instead, we just have these pages that go from one fight to the next, to the next, to the next. Yeah, obviously, it's this action genre and things, but I don't think it's the best service to where we want the plot to end up.
No, but now I am obsessed with Murdock Mysteries, Detective Daredevil, and Ka-Zar Noir.
Right, because like the Midnight Stalker is a very noir idea.
Yeah.
And it would be so interesting to slip into that noir idea for this one as opposed to just an action sequence. And the fact that they didn't, and the fact that the Midnight Stalker is such a throwaway idea when it comes to the plot line, I was deeply, deeply disappointed. Only more so than by the incredibly terrible return of the bad British lingo that Stan thinks is correct.
And that's something that we've talked about a bit on the many programs that we run here, that Thor says verily at thee. Why do Norse people sound like Shakespearean characters, Stan?
It's a choice. And I will say that as we get further into it, once he gets to the castle, we do get some really great fight pages. I think that the page 13 fight between Daredevil and Ka-Zar, you can feel them start to play with panel placement on page 13, panels 4 to 5 that Kevo's showing. There's a panel break between them, but the panel is one. And so it shows off that kind of throw. It has its moments where I'm like, this is a great way to show a fight. But then we follow it up with, I'm just going to sneak off. As we're running away, I'm going to lock the door behind me and make a quick call. And I'm like, this could have been so much meatier and better and not had so much nonsense, because we are now 13 pages into a 20-page issue, because there's 2 pages of letters at the end, and we are just like barely understanding what's going on.
And I think some of that comes down to some of the weirder art choices. I do like a lot of the art in this issue. I think a lot of it's really well blocked, but some of the choices to have no backgrounds, some of the, it's a big blue block and it's a big yellow block and it's a big green block. It kind of gets hard to really feel with the issue. because the cover is also so muted and dull and kind of dingy. There's something about the tonelessness of the gray. The very average clothing that they have Ka-Zar in isn't exactly engaging in any way. And that we are dealing with a plot where it's like somehow the bad guy named Plunder, who is famously a usurping bad guy, is trying to usurp his brother. I don't
And
know.
and like nobody thought like, oh, this guy escaped, perhaps we should alert the authorities in that area because he has such a problem with his brother, we should be watching out for him. Like, this is very much the plot dictates what points we need to cover, and
Yeah.
I feel like it's a really paint by numbers version of the story.
And it's a story we just had.
It's a story we just had, and while I feel that the nerve ray is dumb, at least it raises the stakes a little bit towards the end. But again, like, that is page 18 when that gun goes off, and like page 19 is beautiful. The akimbo kind of panel breaks, the use of like those yellow blue background blockers, the busyness going from super busy up top to very low busyness on the bottom as the submarine rises. Like, it
Totally.
is pretty, but this whole issue feels very much like it either needed to be completely reworked, completely just like the first half of the story, and then like the second half is something else, like his return to New York and trying to get back to normalcy, and then we can get that final panel, which we will get to. I feel really let down by this, and I don't know if it's one of those things where whenever Ka-Zar shows up, it's always going to be a weird issue. It's always going to be not good because he's in such a different genre world than Daredevil.
So here's, I think, my take on it. So many of us think like I could be a Stan Lee. I could churn out 12 books a month, no problem. And maybe you could. Maybe you really could. And I'm not here to tell you that you could or couldn't. But what I do think is that Stan Lee didn't have 50 years of Marvel to pull from.
Right.
And he had no reprints. He had no hardcovers, no digital editions.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have TV shows based on those comics.
Mm-hmm.
TV shows inspired by those comics. He didn't have a million things to source from. He had his memory, his experience, and his ideas.
Right.
And I think he would, just be like, oh, and that's when we'll tell a Ka-Zar story. I don't know that it's that any story that features Ka-Zar is going to be bad because it's such a different genre. I think it's that it smacks of Stan Lee's inability to see that not every shoe fits every foot.
Right. And I also think it speaks towards the 1960s in comics. I mean, and maybe it's different in like the Avengers track over in Fantastic Four or Spider-Man. Daredevil, we have talked a lot about how it feels a little bit like everything gets thrown at the wall and we see what sticks. After 24 issues and 3-4 years, it's starting to feel like nothing is ever going to stick. And so what is going to keep bringing people back over and over again if they don't know what they're going to get, and we're still just trying to catch anyone who might have an extra 5 cents that week?
I really agree. Spider-Man had the luck of being young and cool and, a spider, thwip, whip. And like, there were things about Spider-Man that made it special.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we think about early X-Men, I think back on all of those classic adventures of Jack Diamond, the guy who might have implicitly sexually molested Scott Summers. I think back on all of those amazing appearances of characters like the Master Mold. And that time Marvel Girl showed us how much she loved to vacuum with her telekinesis. I think back on that time that Scott Summers used a racial slur to describe a Middle Eastern man in his own country. I think back on those stories, yeah. I think my thought there is, we didn't get what X-Men became until like 1975, and then we didn't get what it would re-become until 1992, and then 2000. 1-ish. You know, stuff just sort of like naturally used to reboot every 10, 15 years, and now it's every few years. And Daredevil is still so far from an era where it's like, that's Daredevil, that it's wild. Like, I really don't think it's like the Daredevil book until really Miller. You know, there's the amazing Black Widow, you know, repping Black Widow today, got on a little Black Widow gear because I love Natasha so much. But it just feels to me sometimes like Daredevil really just kept surviving. I don't know if it was just like at this point, it's accumulated 40 issues, don't cancel it. It's accumulated 60 issues, don't cancel it. But it never really felt in this time period like Ka-Zar being like, I'm rich, I'll make sure you get home without having to. What is he implying on the last page? That he's going to busk for money?
I mean, it's so fascinating because honestly, like, I'm 90% sure that Matt defended him in court. So Ka-Zar should recognize him at the airport. And it all feels very much like bros who got a little too close in the hot tub last night, like not understanding how to say goodbye at the airport the next morning. It's such a this whole thing is so rushed and so weird and so wild. And I don't know, man. And then we get slammed with this sledgehammer of a final panel.
That could not have been the original final fucking panel. It must have originally been like, oh, he's on his way home. Ka-Zar said.
I honestly don't know. I'm trying to imagine like how this plot can come to be, and I really do think it's we need to get Matt back to New York. Once he gets back to New York, he has to be like completely off his game by whatever is happening there when he gets there. And we need something to occupy him in the meantime. And that's how you slowly make your way there. There's a part of me that honestly thinks that this final panel is one of the first like moments that crystallized for this issue, and they were working their way towards it.
I could believe that. Especially because there are some weird treats in the letters pages from 22 to 24 that one of the letters really connects to this in a way that I find interesting and fascinating.
For me, I didn't realize that Karen and Foggy weren't in this issue. Generally, when Daredevil's off by himself, we have a couple of pages in between where they take over for 3/4 of a page or half a page or whatever. And we didn't have that this issue, which is different for them. And interesting to think about. And then they show up and I'm just like, why? Why are we back to this nonsense? But then at the same time, the implication here that Peter Parker, or I guess Spider-Man, because he signs as Spider-Man, but Peter Parker sat down on a fucking typewriter, typed out this whole letter of, I know you're Daredevil, but I won't tell anyone, maybe, is so weird because secretaries open all the fucking mail. And to me...
And Matt's blind.
But he's Daredevil, so how blind is he? At the same time, it's also one of these things where they really don't think of Karen as having her own machinations. Because to me, if I opened this letter, I wouldn't be like, oh no, could this be true? It would be like, you know, I don't know if I believe it, but based on some shit that I've seen, maybe this is proof and explains a lot.
I would assume it's a prank.
But it's Spider-Man.
But how authentic is it from Spider? Oh, it's got the Spider-Man government seal of
like did she find it in a little like web hanging outside of the window? Like I'm so weirded out by this choice and the way that they went about it. It could have very easily have also just been, Foggy, we just got a letter from Spider-Man addressed to Matt. Do you think we should open it? What if he needs help? I don't know.
What if it's lawyer confidentiality, Karen?
I don't know. But I'm always fascinated because there's always this idea in the world of art, as you know, the idea of, is the author dead? And how much should you look to outside sources for explanations? The old, you can type on Twitter that Dumbledore is gay, but that doesn't make it visible in the books kind of deal. Right. And so how much of these letters pages are like fixing what they realize they fucked up in previous issues?
I think that's one of the things that I find the most interesting about the letters and what they choose to print. I can't believe these are the only letters they received.
No.
Okay, that's number one. Number two, a number of these letters are just letting them come for other letters. It's wild. This is like a subculture, but there actually is a letter where somebody's like, why don't you just have Daredevil out his identity? It would be different. So, like, that's what I mean by, like, I think in some ways they got some ideas from the letters pages.
And I agree. I mean, it's also one of those things of like, do you let the fans run the arc? If the
Yeah.
X-Files fans are so fucking excited for your show, why not get together the pairing that makes them so excited?
Agreed.
So there's always that give and take. I want to believe that there was a core like idea for Daredevil that they were going with before they were getting input on how to mold it. And
I don't believe
know,
they had that.
And I don't think so either. And that's what makes me leery of how much importance they put upon the letters pages and the responses and the ones they choose to showcase.
Well, I'm sure there was no importance, really. You know, I just genuinely enjoy the artifact of it.
Oh, I agree. And I want to get into them. I mean, it's also possible that these were the only ones that didn't cuss them out in ways you can't put into the pages. So
that is very fair as well.
So we have letters issues from issues 22, 23, and 24. Yeah?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And there's between 7 and 8 letters per issue. The first one from Daredevil 22 is just basically ableism in a letter. It's, I don't think Daredevil can read, so you can fuck off with that. And
I mean, I actually don't think that he should be able to read the imprint on a newspaper through his gloves, but that's a personal, like, it's not that I don't think he can read, it's that I think it's difficult to feel either his gloves have to be paper thin for him to be able to do it, or it's bullshit.
But he's got those super senses. The second letter is that, yeah, why doesn't Daredevil just tell the world he's Matt Murdock? This guy is like, wouldn't that be a different thing than all of your other heroes who keep their identities secret? Wouldn't that be challenging of the medium? You know, this becomes a central idea of who Daredevil is in a way that it's not a central idea of anybody else's narrative. Mm-hmm. It's a huge part of other people's narratives, but Daredevil has been outed more times than Ricky Martin. And so I think it's really significant that, you know, it's as early as this letter in issue 22, the second letter, where they're like, what if he was Daredevil out to the world?
Would that make him one of the few that was out in this world? I mean, I know in the movies, it's very rare for one of the superheroes to actually have a secret identity. But back now, yeah, he would have been the only one.
Yeah, I mean, literally, their response is, we think we don't know what we think. That's crazy. I love that. Now, I need to say that, to me, all Billy Clubs are beautiful. Right.
Of course.
There's no bad Billy Clubs. And so when I see all of these letters being like, they're seriously like a letter an issue for a hot minute, being like, but where does the curve of his cane go when he makes it into the Billy Club? Some men have curved Billy Clubs.
I was gonna say, cool with it. I was gonna say, like, have you looked down?
Right?
Have you considered how it fits into your pants, and then it can also do other things?
Just like lay off the curved Billy Clubs. That's ridiculous. There's so many letters. But Tori, there's one that I've been like dying to get to with you. The fourth letter in this issue, I couldn't believe what I read. Now, the fourth letter says, I, at this time, would like to congratulate all who worked on Daredevil 19, as it was one of the best issues I have ever read. I was especially glad to hear that Foggy Nelson had dropped his ridiculous masquerade as Daredevil, which I considered a bit childish. However, in the letter pages, I saw a query about Daredevil's costume, namely how the DD insignia can stand out on his otherwise shadowed chest. I had a pet theory about this for some time. May I put it forth? I assume that Daredevil's costume is made of material much like red velvet. Can you imagine getting punched with a rhino and being like, I'm in red velvet, you can't hurt me. It's pillowy soft.
Don't step on my red suede shoes, fellas.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
If you turn the velvet the other way, it becomes the yellow outfit, and then it's like red, yellow, red.
Yeah, I think that's what this person thinks.
Well, now I want that outfit, though. Can we get that sequin outfit where it's yellow sequins on one side and red sequins on the other, and you can just...
I don't think that would keep him very safe, but I do love it. It gets a little dark for a minute.
Oh.
Letter 5. Daredevil sucks because he doesn't have new gadgets all the time anymore. Sorry, Stan.
This is because of James Bond movies, I'll tell you.
I believe it. And so many people have signature things. Like Cap has his shield, Iron Man has his repulsor ray. On the cover of X-Men #1, Angel has a bazooka.
Okay. Why?
I don't know, but it's one of those images that we don't talk enough about. There's other weird ones. Daredevil should remain funny. Daredevil would be funnier with a seeing eye dog. I think all superheroes are alike. The rest of 22's letters aren't quite as shocking. What I really found amazing is 23 and 24 both feature letters from women.
Ooh, do tell.
The first letter, it's horny. I love it. The first letter in 23 is, Dear Stan, I just finished Daredevil 20, and the only thing I can say is wow. Forgive the unladylike enthusiasm, but what else can I say? To me, Genial Gene Colan is the only man to pencil the sensational solicitors, Nelson and Murdock, especially Matt. I have never seen Magnificent Matthew looking more ruggedly handsome than he did on page 7, panel 5. I know Gene is busy, what with Shellhead and all, but please, please, put him full-time on Daredevil. If I don't see more of the Colan version, I think I'll cry, or at least weep softly. By the way, if Karen Page doesn't want him, I'll take Matt. Signed, Patricia Turner from
Alameda.
It doesn't matter. She's moved. So,
no, she's still there. Just like Matthew. I mean, that is explicit for the time.
She's horny. Get it?
She is into it. And I mean, we were all into it.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we can't go 5 minutes without talking about Matt Murdock's thighs half the time. If Karen doesn't want him, I'll take him.
Girl, he's fictional.
Well.
Yeah, Patricia. Damn.
Damn, Pat. Listen, as a girl who takes her time with her fictional fellas these days, sometimes it can be nice to forget about the fella who comes in and says that your meat is too well done, to enjoy a gent who might, sucker punch him and say, "What's new, pussycat?" or whatever. So,
what's new is these letters get real aggressive. Several letters are like, you're bad at your own continuity, like the second to last letter. They literally are like, you don't know what you're doing. These characters don't look alike, these two issues. These characters don't have consistency. Oh, yeah, this one right here says, you guys don't know how your own last issue ended.
Well, I would never encourage such blatant aggressive criticism, but I do think there is a grain of salt of truth inside all of these complaints that they could consider, especially because that was one of our complaints for this issue.
I agree completely.
But it's never right to go after your creators, because you never know how they're going to combat you.
Let me tell you, somebody came at the creators and was like, just so you know, the way you have Daredevil's hearing work, not possible. And after that, there's all these letters that are like, so you know, I'm an auditory specialist. You're wrong.
I'm waiting for NASA to call up and be like, let me tell you, our instruments don't vibrate. He wouldn't be able to fly a rocket ship. I mean, we got to suspend our disbelief.
But hold on. This guy in here, Stan Lee, this guy is
Smiley.
Let me tell you, this is how this stuff with Ka-Zar went down. But then he's like, by the way, in case you think Daredevil's never flown a plane before. And I want to be like, why don't you just reference the time he flew a rocket ship before?
I had the exact same note in here that I was just going to bypass. But for fuck's sake, Stan, remember your own continuity.
For fuck's sake. Because one of the other letters is like, I love that you brought back a classic Daredevil bad guy. I would like to see more classic Daredevil bad guys come out.
Sure.
There is another guy being like, hi, how does the cane curve work?
I'm trying to be YouTube appropriate.
Same. There's also a letter that's like, I am a sad soldier and your Marvel comics make me happy. Thank you from Soldier to Comics. And that's cute.
Oh my
That's the
good
last.
God.
Yeah. So the next letter kicks off with somebody correcting someone else's German from another letter.
That is how grammar Nazis get started.
It's evidently specifically about the length of Der Sauerberg, which is actually 716 pages, not 600 pages. This guy got it wrong.
Man, men have been well actually even before feminism was there to try to fight them off.
I swear. The third letter in this one is so sensitively emotional. There's some sort of like, "Are you okay, my gay brother?" in the response. He's like, seriously, I love you guys so much. And even if we are wallowing in troubles and people are fighting in Vietnam and France is kicking us out of their country, I can always imagine that some guy who thinks he's the god of thunder will risk his life for our planet. And the response is, we're not quite sure if you're putting us on or not. Well, because that's how gay this letter is.
How long do they keep publishing these letters?
Now.
Like at the end of every Daredevil issue is 2 pages of
one page and not every issue of every book, but yeah.
Wow.
Wow.
I mean, it's an interaction. It makes people excited to be like, will my letter be in the next issue?
Yeah. And especially the fourth letter. This guy is like, I'm a senior and I love Marvel and all of my friends make fun of me for it, but someday Marvel will rule the earth, so I don't care.
I mean, he's right, and I hope he bought stock.
Well, nothing is better than letter 5. Dear Stan and Jean, your letters have more than their fair share of nitpickers, hair splitters, and hypercritics. For instance, one fan from Drake University in issue 20 had a scientific explanation as to why Daredevil couldn't possibly hear as he does. Will Jay please explain how a mother with less than ordinary hearing but 2 good eyes can hear at the end of one of a long ranch type home with the Rolling Stones on stereo what her children are up to in the other end of the house? Most mothers have this ability, myself included. As an avid science fiction fan of close to 30 years standing, as a mother who happily subscribes to all Marvel comics for her son and reads them herself, and as a good citizen, I believe that Daredevil's talents, like all things, are possible, even probable. Other improbabilities not so long ago were splitting an atom, orbiting a spaceship, and the silly flying belt of Buck Rogers. Among us may walk a daredevil or anything. Signed, Mrs. Liz Lenahan from Jacksonville, Florida. Mrs. Liz Lenahan.
I mean, she's like, what if God was one of us and he's already a mother to 2 toddlers and he's still better than you?
Yes. Good. I love it.
I love it.
Love this mom. Love her ferocity. Ooh. Love her lack of shit for you. The last 2 are kind of silly. Number 6 is like, I'm in a band called Opposite Six, and I normally don't read comics, but I was bored after a gig and I read comics. They're cool. Thanks.
Cool story, bro.
Right? Nice plug for your band. And letter 7 is just like, I'm British and Daredevil is cool. Oh,
really? They don't look at it and be like, this is a weird version of what I look like? All right.
No, they're good with it.
To each pot a lid, as they say. These letters are so interesting to me because they both reveal and don't reveal and only reveal what they want. Man, this whole issue has my head in a scramble.
I hope nothing has your head more scrambled than the fact that they say that the next issue is Daredevil 43 in that little yellow box.
No. Oh, no. I mean, 43. Like, who else would... Oh, Stan. Stan, my man. Stan, my fellow man.
Throwing sticks.
That's like 2 years away.
I think it might be Spider-Man or maybe Fantastic Four.
That would be my guess too. Is just like he meant to say like DD 25, and because I presume that we're gonna get another Spider-Man issue where Daredevil shows up soon.
Yeah, at some point,
eventually. So like that would have made somewhat sense, but I don't know, man. I feel like these letters are always so interesting to me, especially because It feels like a carnival barker sometimes when they respond to these. Like, well, gee, Willikers, thank you so much for coming on down. You know, if you really feel like that you need something a little more exciting, you should head on over to the candy corn store or whatever. And sometimes it's like, hey, buddy, if you don't like this, you can go and suck clams. Like,
I mean, I really think it was just just trying to make people feel included, just to make people feel special. It was a tradition. It was a way that you could interact with your fan base. It gave a marginalized group, comic readers who felt like they weren't being represented other places, a way to feel special. You know, I think these were just really a part of the tradition, of the joyous tradition of comics. And they are just like such a part of the classic reading of comics, and that you could find out upcoming things or where the characters might appear in other titles in the letters pages, or a creative team change. It was just like a cool way to communicate. It was always just like a fun thing to read, especially like to establish history for the characters.
Yeah, I can get behind that, I suppose. I'm so much more in love with the idea of extra pages being a way to convey more interesting, universe expanding information. But I guess that's something that would come later. And
we also get it like the pinups with the Billy Club, or the pinups with the training center. We do kind of get it, but I agree with you. It would have been so much easier to draw one big thing like that instead of answering all these letters and having all these tiny little art.
Yeah. I do love that they have Let's Level with Daredevil, though. I think that's really charming.
Yes.
And I'm learning more about the MMMS thing.
The Mary Marvel Marching Society.
Wow. What a time capsule.
This has been a blast. You know, I give this issue like a C-, to be honest.
You are such a kind critic.
I am. What can I say? I'm a guy in a Deadpool hat. I can't make too many judgments. I give this issue a C-. I give these letter pages 23 and 24 an A+ for having ladies. I think the number of guys who have never worked with a curved Billy Club really just means you got to be giving your friends more reach arounds.
Seriously.
And, you know, if you don't have a curved one yourself, just find someone who does. This has been a really fun time getting us to where I think it finally is getting Daredevil-y. Mike Murdock, very Daredevil-y, big times in 25.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I think we've been touching on the fact that, like, we haven't fully solidified Matt and Daredevil as two distinct identities yet that become an important characteristic to each of their arcs. And I think that Mike Murdock, when he comes, is going to really help with that. And so I'm excited to really, like, delve into those identity issues. Literally.
Yeah, it's going to be amazing. I can't wait until we return to take a look at Mike Murdock. Tori, where can everybody find you online?
Again, you can find me on Twitter at Tori_Sheehan and on Instagram at SMTori. That's Tori with an I. Nico, where can folks find you?
You guys can find me all over this amazing network here at Hubs Plus, as well as on our partner shows like X's for Podcasts and HTML, where I cover things like comics and movies, with HTML, of course, with our amazing producer, Kevo, who does such an incredible job keeping the show running, keeping it beautiful, making it so nice. What a great show to be a part of, and could not be as amazing as it is without Kevo. So whether it's me at Nico Action on Twitter and Instagram, or X's for Podcast at X's for Podcast on Twitter, got tons of places you can check us out. And until next time, stay fearless. We synced up by the end.
We got there.
Yeah.